Hi, my name is Rick Barron, and this is the first in the REF5 series where I want to review some of the early historical points of neurology and neuroscience. And the first story I want to tell you is the tale of two Toms. So the first Tom is Thomas Willis. So he was born in the 1600s, went to school in Oxford, and while he was a student at Oxford and a medical student, the Civil War broke out. Not the US Civil War, this was the British Civil War between Charles I and Cromwell, the royalists and the parliamentarians, and Willis sided with the king. Since Cromwell won the war, this delayed his education a little bit, and it took him a while to finally get his degree. While he was a student in Oxford, William Harvey was doing experiments as a faculty member on the heart and published De Motu Cordis. So Willis went into practice after the Civil War in Oxford. He had a very busy practice. He apparently used to go out to the marketplace to find patients. But his practice grew. The poll tax showed he was the highest paid earner in Oxford. He did autopsies on his patients who deceased. Interestingly, when Charles II was restored and the king was back in place, he was named the Sedleyan Professor of Natural Philosophy at Oxford, and he gave a lecture every Wednesday and Saturday morning at 8 a.m. His students were very famous: Robert Hooke, John Locke, Christopher Wren, and particularly John Locke took notes on the lectures, and we have those, so we know exactly what Willis was saying in addition to his publications. He was one of the original Fellows of the Royal Society, and he was buried in Westminster Abbey, one of the few physicians who were. So what is Thomas Willis famous for in neurology? He's the first that used the term neurology. He called it the doctrine of the nerves, and he's really the first experimental medicine physician in neurology. He published this amazing book, Cerebri Anatomy, or the Anatomy of the Brain and the Nerves, and it went through 9 editions while he was alive, and he is rightly known as the Harvey of the nervous system. The book was illustrated by his student Christopher Wren, in this book he describes his experiments where he would inject the blood vessels with ink, and he showed that there was a circle of arteries around the base of the brain that we now call the circle of Willis. And he said that if by chance 1 or 2 should be stopped of the vessels, there might easily be found another passage. This was a monumental breakthrough in the understanding of brain anatomy, and ultimately is the basis for what we know about stroke. He also wrote a number of other books in his lifetime, after he had died, his followers published The London Practice of Physic by Thomas Willis, which had chapters from a lot of his previous books. One is a chapter of the palsy, which is in the Physic book, and where he first describes myasthenia gravis, where he described a woman who temporarily lost speech and became mute as a fist. The other Tom is Thomas Sydenham, and he is sometimes called the English Hippocrates. He also went to college in Oxford about the same time as Willis, and he sided with the parliamentarians. He got through school a bit quicker, although interestingly he did join the army during college. And then he sort of disappeared for a while. We don't know what happened, but he began practicing medicine in London in 1661. Then the plague hit, and he went to Cambridge, where he got his doctorate of medicine. And while in Cambridge, he wrote the first of his books on the method of treating fevers. He dedicated that book to Robert Boyle in 1676. He wrote 4 more books. All were descriptive, practical medicine books, observational, no hypotheses. He emphasized a very careful history and exam and not theory. He didn't dispense drugs. His therapies usually were exercise, cooling, and diet. He didn't emphasize research of pathologic data. He actually thought that pathology could confuse physicians. So he was the opposite of Willis. Most considered him a better clinician, but he was less scientific. And I actually think of him as the original Osler. This is from his book Medical Observations, and actually it was in the preface, and a friend of his talked about a letter that Sydenham wrote where he said, "The more I observed the facts of this science with an attentive eye, and the more I studied them with due and proper diligence, the more I became confirmed in the opinion which I have held up to the present hour, that the art of medicine was to be properly learned only from its practice and exercise." So he really didn't publish much in neurology. In fact, he avoided it. And one of his friends said he didn't undertake to write upon diseases that he was unable to cure. But he is well known for describing chorea in 2 of his books. And he has long descriptions and observations of men and women suffering from choreiform disorders that now we know as Sydenham's chorea, and he compared it in his book to St. Vitus's dance. So we have the tale of 2 Toms. Thomas Willen was the Why Tom, and also a royalist, interestingly. And Thomas Sydenham was the What Tom, and he was on the opposite side of the political spectrum, a parliamentarian. So I don't think anything about their politics have anything to do with them being of the why or the what mentality. I don't think so. But I think we see scientists and physicians over time split into these 2 categories, the why explorers and the what explorers. I've always sort of considered myself more of a what explorer. Maybe the why explorers are a little smarter. So that's my end of this session of RAF 5 and the first installment about the history of neurology.